In a previous video, we discussed the economic and territorial roller coaster that was the Byzantine Empire. This video will cover its better furnished successor, the Ottoman Empire. For context, the Ottomans came from Anatolia, which is the easty bit of Turkey. Osman I founded both the Ottoman Empire and Oscorp in 1299. At this point in its decline, Constantinople was the half-starved to death husk of the Byzantine Empire. Anatolia, much like that patchwork quilt your grandmother made that you're very reluctant to put on your bed, was a mess of assorted independent states that would be far less confusing if they were all one thing. Thankfully, Osman had the courtesy to make the lives of historians much easier and more comfortable by conquering Anatolia for the Ottomans, so I don't have to bother talking about all those tiny little states. All you need to know about them is that they put up about as much of a fight as Regina George put up against that bus. Too soon? Osman is said to have had a dream of a tree that spanned 3 continents. Symbolism much? Osman told his followers about this during his famous I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C. This dream of his caught on, and the Ottomans spent the next 150 years kicking ass, taking names, and taking considerable sums of land, including Constantinople. Yeah, screw that quilt! Further screwing of the quilt ensued as the empire picked up steam. Half a century after the conquest of Constantinople, Sultan Selim I pushed the empire's boundaries far eastward into the Levant and Egypt. In doing so, he solidified the Ottoman Sultanate's claim to be the California of Islam, I think. The next sultan in line was Suleiman the Magnificent. Pretty sweet title if you ask me. After being saved from a crazy man with a knife by a crazier man with half a lute at a party during his youth, Suleiman the Magnanimous became a very effective emperor. Inspired by Alexander the Suleiman the Magnetic engaged in several military campaigns in Eastern Europe, North Africa, and Mesopotamia. In addition to his conquests, Suleiman the Magna Carta is also notable for being an exceptionally prudent administrator and legislator. The overhauled and substantially simplified legal code that Suleiman the Magnesium created lasted for 300 years. The final cherry on top of Suleiman the Magnolia's metaphorical cake of achievements were his cultural reforms. Suleiman the Magnifying Glass served as a patron of the arts for the entire empire, creating hundreds of dedicated artistic societies that propelled the Ottoman Empire into a cultural golden age. It's no wonder that Suleiman the Magnum PI tops BuzzFeed's top 10 sultans lists. Trust me though, number 6 will surprise you. While we're here, let's just appreciate how nice it is that everything is going the Ottomans' way, because it will stop doing that very soon. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that the second half is pretty much always about how everything goes to hell. Right now, the empire is doing a pretty good job, but will it blend? Unfortunately, common knowledge dictates that after a high like this, things will get some degree of worse, and tragically, it did not blend. After Suleiman died, the empire was stagnant. The gist of the preceding century can be pretty well summarized by the reign of Ahmet I and Murad IV. The 14-year-old Sultan Ahmet oversaw the tail end of a 15-year war with the Habsburgs, resulting in a treaty that ended the convenient tribute the Austrians regularly paid to the Ottomans up until that point. Ahmet also waged a war on Persia that cost the empire eastern Anatolia and Mesopotamia. Murad, who became sultan at the ripe age of 9, is anyone in charge of the sultan screening process here? Seriously, they're all kids! Waged another war during which those territories were reclaimed. So we're right where we were before. Well, I guess that's convenient. This period of stagnation ended with the rule of Mehmed IV, who gave much of the Sultan's power to the Ottoman Grand Viziers, who up until that point had just been in the corner playing cut the rope on their phones. While all of this stagnation business was going on, there were wars and revolts all over the place. The Europeans sent their kids to college, so they were always ahead in military technology. The Ottomans fought a series of naval wars against Portugal, a brief war with Russia and Ivan the Terrible, that Habsburg war from earlier, those 2 wars I mentioned a minute ago with Persia, all while suppressing a few revolts. The last big blow was the Great Turkish War, in which an alliance of the Holy Roman Empire, which was, by the way, neither Holy, Roman, nor an empire, but that's another video for another time, the Poles, the Venetians, the Russians, and some others joined forces. And by their powers combined, they were known as the Holy League, and they kicked the crap out of the Ottomans so badly that they ceded Central Europe and never even thought about going back there again. You know how you could set up an automated flower delivery? Well, the Holy League all pitched in to get the Ottomans an automated weekly whoop-ass delivery. This whoop-ass delivery ran through 1739 and included a war against the Russians, a war against the Austrians, and a war against the Russians and the Austrians because everyone hates the Ottomans, apparently. Thankfully, the next 3 decades following those wars were relatively peaceful because Europe was too occupied with the growing Prussian threat to bother kicking the crap out of the Ottomans anymore. This peaceful interim ended as a result of Russian-backed Ukrainians, sound familiar, who had a jog through the Ottoman town of Balta. During this jog, they stopped in for a drink of water and a sandwich at the local pub. When the barkeep served the joggers a turkey sandwich instead of the ham they asked for in an attempt at a stupid and anachronistic joke, the Russian joggers stormed out of the bar, wrote an unfavorable Yelp review, and then killed everyone and burned the town to the ground. Some people just can't take a joke. For more on this, let's go live inside the Pierre with Glass McGlass. Now, Glass, what can you tell us? Thanks, Doc. If you take a look around, you'll see that the Russian used guns and swords to kill people and fire to burn down the town. Back to you, Eddie. Glass, I honestly don't know why we even pay you. This has been Inside the Pierre with Glass McGlass, brought to you by Chevy. After this little incident, the Ottomans declared war on those pesky Russians and were soundly beaten in the following slew of wars that ran out the 1700s. Ouch. Speaking of wars, and losing them. The Ottoman military was known for its Janissary corps. The Janissaries, who by the way are an absolute pain to deal with in Assassin's Creed Revelations, were elite infantry and also served as the Sultan's personal guard. They were the cat's pajamas in the early years of the empire. Things started to get iffy and rather undisciplined when they shifted from being a standing army to being composed of citizen soldiers by the 1800s. You know your army isn't going to win you any big wars when their main concern is who's going to win the big game during the Sunday neighborhood cookout. The Janissaries staged a revolt in 1807 for some reason that killed Sultan Suleiman III, and in 1826, Sultan Mahmud II baited the Janissaries into a mutiny against the Sultan's Topkapı Palace. While the Janissaries were knocking on the Sultan's door, the Sultan had the undefended Janissary barracks set on fire. Military historians refer to this technique as the old bait and burn down your house maneuver. The Janissaries were executed and exiled, in that order, and ultimately disbanded so that a more modern European-style military could replace them. That theme of European-style modernization carried on for the next century, as the Ottomans made more secular laws, restructured banking, and got on board with that whole Industrial Revolution bandwagon, or more accurately, band train, I guess. This buddying up to European powers came in handy when Russia walked into the club like, what up, I got a big army and I want to take all of your land, something, thrift shops, whatever. Anyway, France, Britain, Sardinia, and the Ottomans teamed up against the Russians in the Crimean War. This famous war was the backdrop for the also famous poem The Charge of the Laser Bears, I think. The Europeans won the war and pushed the Russians back for all of 20 minutes, although in 1877 there was another Russo-Turkish war because why the hell not? On the bright side, they all had the Russo-Turkish rewards cards with them, so the 10th war was free. Lucky them. On the not-so-bright side, the Russians came away from that one with a decisive win, and the policy of Ottoman-held European states insisted that they'd never met the Ottomans before and awkwardly shuffled away to get their own tables on the other side of the bar. Things got worse by the eve of World War I as Britain, France, and Italy took away all of Ottoman-controlled Africa in the same way that your asshole friend in middle school ate one bite of your food and then forced you to give him the rest because of germs. In the early 1900s, there was some complicated internal political business that solidified the Ottoman Empire standing as the sick man of Europe. All you need to know about this was that the empire was losing territory from every direction and couldn't even keep its own government working properly. That empire was more of a mess than the aftermath of a baby that had crayons, a perfectly nice living room, and a thirst for vandalism. In 1914, there was some business with the war or something, who knows. After losing that one, too, the final nail in the coffin was the Turkish War for Independence from 1919 to 1922. The Ottoman Empire was replaced with the Republic of Turkey in 1923, after which comedians all over the world switched from one unfunny and overplayed gag to another one. Good thing I'm above that.